All right, let's talk about the Dolphins' offensive line week one performance. You guys should know me by now, Eric Smith, Five Reasons Sports contributor, also co host on Scouting the Fins, and you can find that on the Five Reasons YouTube channel and also the 3 Yards Per Carry podcast feed. Before we get into the grades, I just want to give you a reminder that these grades are my personal grades for the offensive line, and they are generated from individual play grades of every player on each snap. For a more detailed version of that process, I'll link the preseason week one video in the description where I went over the grading process in a lot more detail. But if you're new here, the main thing you need to keep in mind is that my grading scale considers 5.00 to be an average grade for a Dolphins offensive lineman. Let's get into the details for this week. All right, as we get into grades for week one versus the Colts, you can see that we have 5 players listed here, and James Daniels did start the game at right guard, but he did not play enough snaps to receive a grade. Also had Larry Borum, who came in for Austin Jackson late in the game. He also did not play enough snaps to get a grade. So we have 5 graded players, and after we go through the overall grade, we're going to look at them from the lowest graded player to the highest graded. So our overall grade for week one was 6.30. And like I said before, 5.00 is the average. Um, I thought this grade reflected what we saw on tape with the Dolphins' offensive line. It was not a great performance by any means, but it also wasn't anywhere near the biggest issue. As we go through the grades, we're going to see a couple of players that really pulled this grade up, a couple of players that were close to average, and one that really pulled it down, right? So let's get started. And our first one is going to be, again, lowest to highest. Kion Smith came in with a 3.12 this week, which is below average. As we get into the film review here, Kion Smith is going to be your right guard playing for James Daniels. And the 2 bad plays that we have today for Kion are essentially the same thing. So on this play, we are going to get an outside zone to the left for Devon Achan, and he's going to look to cut this back. Not able to do it. But if we look at Kion Smith as he comes off the ball here, right? Both are stepping with the right foot, should be comboing up through the defensive tackle up to number 48. But you can see that Kion misses completely and then doesn't get up to the linebacker. But the main issue here is that by missing completely, now you're asking Austin Jackson to try to get in here and cut off this 3 technique with no help at all. And that's a tough ask for Austin Jackson. Whereas if Kion Smith gets a piece of him here, right, he should be playing up through the defender the way that Jonah is on this side, then we probably get Austin Jackson around into the B gap. And on this play, we're hopefully able to cut it back here, maybe even off of Kion Smith's block. But because as Kion gets off the ball, that right hand does not get into that defender at all, then you end up with a no gain or short gain. And then the next one is going to be almost identical here. So same idea. This is going to be, they actually converted this. I think it was a 3rd and 1. It's going to be an Ollie Gordon run. But similar idea here where it's an inside zone to your left side. And Kion is stepping down into the A gap with Austin Jackson trying to fit in there as well. And they should be working up to this linebacker, number 48. But again, when this ball is snapped here, left foot, you can see him trying to step that right foot back into it, which is exactly right, but he's kind of throwing up a chicken wing there, misses completely, and in this case, gets completely turned around and is running back into the line of scrimmage instead of to the linebacker that he's supposed to get to. So those weren't the only 2 bad plays for Kion Smith, but these are 2 that really stood out for me. And I think it's stuff that, if James Daniels misses time and Kion Smith is the resolution at right guard while James Daniels is out, I think we're going to see improvement here. It's just that, he hasn't had snaps doing this type of thing with Austin Jackson. it wasn't all bad for Kion. There's some upside here if he is, to play guard more this season. Here's a good job picking up a blitz, able to get to that linebacker and just run him past the quarterback essentially. And then this one is going to be an interception, but still a good job by Kion Smith here. Again, good job picking up the stunt to the inside. Gets swatted a little bit there, but nice job of resetting his feet and running that defender wide enough to let Tua move out of there. Again, on your right side. So on this one, this is still outside zone. Not sure why we're giving it to Malik Washington and not having Ollie Gordon as part of the game plan. But in both of these cases, right, you have Jackson out here to the end, and then you have your right guard and your left guard are basically pinning the defensive tackles with your left tackle and your center looping around. So I like what Kion does here in terms of getting that outside half of the man, getting some vertical push. Now he gets, the defender sheds him late in the play there, but you're talking, a 5+ yard gain there. So I still thought this was a good rep from Kion Smith. And then our next one here. So another good pass pro rep. Good job picking up the twist. Right, we got the penetrator down here that Kion is able to get inside of, right? And now he's walling him off from the quarterback, giving the quarterback an opportunity to step into some space in the pocket. He ends up scrambling here, but good job by Kion Smith. And then the last one that I have for Kion before we move on is just another good job picking up a blitz here, right? So this is going to be basically a 5-0 protection, right? Let's get back to the beginning. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right, for the 5 linemen. But as we see this develop, right, Keon's eyes are out here quick, but the most dangerous of the 5 are to the inside. So we see him peeling back to the inside. And you can see that, Austin Jackson's kind of taking up 2 players there. But good job by Kion here of starting to his right, recognizing that blitz, and neutralizing the blitzer. So, like I said, there was good and bad for Kion. I think that overall, I'm cautiously optimistic that if he has to play guard more, that we'll see some improvement. I think he was put into a tough spot, being asked to step in for James Daniels just a couple of snaps into the game. Next player is going to be Jonah Savaiinaea, coming in at 4.38. So, like I said, 5.0 is average. Came in just below average, which I don't think is an awful thing for your rookie left guard put into, a tough situation with the way that the game flow went. So I was okay with this grade overall, but definitely something we need to continue to see improve. In my process here, when I pull the videos, I just kind of go through the game and just, grab stuff that has something that interests me throughout the game. Most of the time that ends up with some good and bad snaps for each player. For Jonah, I don't have any of the good ones, but there was plenty of good in the game, right? You don't get an almost average grade with no good stuff. But we're going to take a look at some of the places that he needs to improve, and just kind of talk about how it's stuff that can improve. It's not him physically losing. So this is going to be a duo to the right side. And we can see here that Patrick Paul recognizes the edge defender walking up here late. Probably some sort of call here, an out call or something like that, where Patrick Paul is now going wide. And instead of Jonah and Brewer comboing up to number 44, now Jonah should be peeling out here to the outside. And you can see that everybody else is on the same page because the combo on the backside here with James Daniels and Austin Jackson, eyes are getting to this linebacker in here. We're leaving this one unblocked. But because Jonah does not get the call, nobody ends up blocking this edge player, and he's able to slant inside and make the play. So again, right, got a negative grade for the play, but this is not a physical limitation. This was a play that was fairly early in the game, and it was just a miscommunication up front. Next one here is going to be the interception where Tua overthrew Tyreek Hill. And this interception is on Tua. Not gonna, give him a pass on this, but Jonah getting walked back into his lap, certainly didn't help things. Would have liked to see Tua maybe take a little bit of a shovel to the left before throwing this. Um, but had Jonah been a little more stout up front, then maybe Tua isn't trying to throw over the defender and sailing it high. So this is one that Jonah got a negative mark, as well as Tua would have if I was grading quarterbacks. All right, now we're getting some 5-0 protection, 5-on-5. And on this one, you can see that Jonah is just a little off with the punch there, right? Kind of gets deked out by the defensive tackle there, jumping back and not giving him his chest. Jonah's a little far over his skis, leaning forward, and not able to pick up the stunt, gets completely turned around. But again, right, you go from being a college tackle to an NFL guard, you're going to have this here and there. This is something I think that we'll definitely see improvement from Jonah on. And then this one I had in the negative plays, but the more that I look at it, I'm not downgrading Jonah on it. Right? We can see him here at left guard. And what I want you to watch there is obviously he's falling down. Not a good look. But if we watch his right foot as Aaron Brewer steps back there, he's stepping on Jonah's foot. And that's what's knocking Jonah down. So, just one of those things that, optics are bad, but when you really look at what happened, it wasn't necessarily a loss by Jonah, just a unfortunate series of events where he got his foot stepped on and fell backwards. And then last one for Jonah here on your left side. So again, going to get bull rushed back into the quarterback, and he's able to scramble outside of the pocket, right? So this wouldn't get marked as a complete loss because you're still giving the quarterback a bit of a shot, and there's way worse reps than this. But when you're talking about wanting a strong interior of the pocket, having your guard walk back into the quarterback is not your ideal scenario. So need to see him continue to clean up his technique here. But this is something that I'm confident that we'll see improvement from Jonah on. As we continue to the grades, our next player to review is going to be Austin Jackson. You can see that he is pretty on par with the overall offensive line grade for this week, and slightly above average for individual offensive line scores. This was the type of game I only have 2 film clips that we're going to review for him, and they are both negative clips again. This was a game for Austin Jackson where he was fairly quiet, went fairly unnoticed, and I think that when we're talking about Austin Jackson, that's good for him, right? Because he's good in the run game, and that doesn't always show up when you're watching it live and we're talking about offensive line performance. But he has a tendency to show up in a bad way in pass protection, and really didn't do that very much this week. So I thought that it was a solid week for him overall. Both of our clips for Austin Jackson are going to be similar, and it's going to be important because, if we don't clean it up, teams are going to continue to do this. So this is obviously the fumble by Tua. And, I initially had this on Jackson, and I still kind of do, but if you watch the left arm of Laiatu Latu here, he's got Jackson gripped up inside his shoulder pads, and he's preventing him from getting outside and maybe getting a piece of that corner. You can see he spins him all the way around there. So this happens, right? And it rarely gets called. So can't lean on it too much as being an excuse. Would like to see Jackson not get in there quite as deep, and maybe once he has a little more trust of his rookie on the right side being able to handle that B gap, then maybe he doesn't get there so deep. But while there is blame that goes to Austin Jackson, this is one that's somewhat explainable by a defensive hold as well. And the next one here, different angle, very similar play, where this defensive end is going to slant to the inside and the corner is going to come to the outside. Doesn't look like Austin Jackson sees this one at all. In this case, this is a slide protection to the right. And you can see that Aaron Brewer is getting off the ball, getting to his right side A gap. Jonah is getting to the right side B gap. And Jackson's got to have everything outside of that because your tight end here is going out for a pass. So he needs to be able to see this, right? Probably given a call to Kion Smith here that we got to get out to the right side more, but he appears to never see it. His defender goes to the inside. By the time he's looking back to the outside, it's way too late. So, like I said, these blitzes where they're slanting the defensive end to the inside and bringing a defensive back off the edge is something the Dolphins are going to have to clean up for next week, or I would fully expect the Patriots to take advantage of this as well. Back to the grades, our next highest is going to be Aaron Brewer coming in with a very respectable 7.04. Wasn't his greatest game, but wasn't a bad game by any means. We're going to start out with a negative rep from Brewer, and this is more so just a limitation overall that you're going to get with Aaron Brewer. So this is the 5-0 protection that we've talked about in a couple of other clips as well. Basically, they're getting each offensive lineman matched up one-on-one. And in this case, this is what teams are going to do to take advantage of Aaron Brewer. He's a smaller guy, so taking on these big noses, especially ones that can get upfield the way that this can, is going to be an issue that the Dolphins will have to find ways to mitigate, whether it's getting the ball out quicker, sliding some help that way, and keeping an extra guy in there. But in this case, they decided to go with that 5-0 protection, get everybody out on a route, and you can see that Brewer kind of gets walked back into Tua. Not a complete loss, but as we talked about earlier with Jonah, having a shorter quarterback, you don't want to have interior pressure in the pocket. First good one that we have for Brewer here is going to be him reaching this linebacker. And this is a poor play overall. I talked about this a little bit on the Twitter timeline that felt like Savaainaea, as we're looking at this, right, it's outside zone to the right. So as he takes his steps, right, not going to count that one. We'll say 1, 2, 3. At this point, he should have eyes on the edge defender and reading the leverage. At this point, Julian Hill does not have outside leverage, so he should be looking to press this as far as he can and then get upfield in there. And by the 5th step is when that cut should happen, right? So that's 3, 4, 5. Right now, he should be planting right foot and getting through there. But for whatever reason, Achane continues to take this outside, gets to step 8 or 9 before he then tries to cut back, and ends up only getting a few yards where, we're passing up an explosive play just to try to get to the sideline. But back on topic, Aaron Brewer here, great job of scraping right behind this defensive tackle, climbing up to this linebacker, flipping the hips around, and sealing him off. Just love his athleticism. And then, of course, finishes it with the defender on the ground. And then our other one for Brewer here. So this is going to be, what I call a Texas route where the running back is going out and then coming back in. And it's not really a true screen. You can see that everybody else is just big on big here. But Brewer's going to peel out without crossing the line of scrimmage, which is key here because if he gets downfield, it's going to be a penalty, right? Nice and smooth along there. Ends up picking off that linebacker. Another pancake block for him. And then our last player, Big Pat Paul, had a great preseason. Comes in with a perfect grade for week 1. And we can go through and we can nitpick and we say that, that this play should have been a half point off. But I didn't have a single loss for him the entire game. And if you want to go back and find some, you're more than welcome to do it. But, you're not going to find much. This was a great game from Pat Paul. And it was refreshing to see him have a strong preseason and continue it into week 1 of the regular season. Obviously not going to have bad ones for Pat Paul here, but a couple of good ones. So this is going to be a run play, and this is still an outside zone concept. And even though it cuts all the way back, when you look at the way the blocks are planned to execute here, right? You have Austin Jackson has Latu on the outside here. Kion Smith, Aaron Brewer are comboing to number 48. So as he's stepping up, right, even though the concept is outside zone to the right, you can almost tell pre-snap this is going to cut back right away. And you see that wind back action from HN getting his eyes back early. You get the kick out from Alec Ingold on the split flow action, Julian Hill working up. But the big block here is Patrick Paul washing that defensive tackle the whole way through. So looking at where he starts, almost middle of the field, Jonah gets in there a little bit, but then Pat Paul takes over and drives him all the way out the hashes. So nice job creating space in the run game there for Patrick Paul. And then the other one, right? So this is late in the game. This was Zach Wilson, but I felt kind of bad that I didn't include any pass pro reps from Patrick Paul because he was just dominant the entire time. And this is again, right, just him able to engulf the defender, and it happened all game. So really strong game from Patrick Paul overall. And there you have it. So these are my grades for week one, right? In order: Patrick Paul, Aaron Brewer, Austin Jackson, Jonah, Savaiinaea, and Kion Smith. Comes out just over a average grade for where they have been in the past. I think it was a good start to the season for the offensive line. Hoping that as we move forward, we can find some games where the guys that start the game actually finish it as well, which doesn't happen very often for the Miami Dolphins. But appreciate you guys watching. Feel free to leave a comment below. Let me know what you think of this. Let me know, if there's something you'd like to add. There's been, talk before of expanding it to the tight ends and fullbacks, but this, takes a few hours for me to do every week. And I do the offensive line, one, because I love offensive line play, and two, because I don't have to chase them around the field trying to find them and grade them based on where they are. So that's kind of where we are with that. Not sure I'm going to have a lot more time to expand it this year. But if there is more context or more information that you're looking at, for the five guys up front, let me know and I'll see what I can do. As always, appreciate you guys watching, and we'll talk again soon.